Hello and welcome to Tifo IRL, our new channel, Tifo, but in real life. We're going to talk today about Paul Pogba. Paul Pogba bossed the midfield for France yesterday against Germany. Fantastic performance, and of course it's led to some questions about why do we see this sort of Pogba playing for France, but maybe not so much for his club side. So we're going to have a quick look. Before we do that, I would encourage you to sign up to The Athletic using the code theathletic.com/Tifo Football. We've got loads of great writers covering the Euros. There's plenty of content on there. And obviously, if you want to keep up with what's happening with your club team as well during the summer, because football never stops, does it? Go to The Athletic. It's £1 a month for 6 months. It's really good. So now, Paul Pogba. So before we go to the board, I think it's worth doing something that's maybe not what you've come to expect from Tifo IRL, which is to have a quick chat about intangibles. So obviously Paul Pogba at Manchester United, massive fee, an expectation that he's going to come in and transform this side, and that, you know, maybe Manchester United are built around Paul Pogba, and it just hasn't worked out. There have been various reasons, issues with formation possibly. This season, obviously, Bruno Fernandes has come in and he's become the hub around what a lot of Manchester United do. And obviously, there's also been negative press around Pogba, criticisms of things to do outside of football, which have their reasons and probably best not to go into them here. Having said that, for France, totally different setup. This French team feels very, very united. There's a lovely photo of them all in an aeroplane, and Benzema's kind of lounging there and Pogba's at the back doing a little signal, and it feels very happy. This is a player who's won the World Cup, who was outstanding in that campaign, and the French squad feels united and I suppose more equal. Like, everyone is doing their bit. Everyone is allowed to be themselves in this France squad. And I think it's an interesting comment on Didier Deschamps as a manager. You know, as a player, he was a very combative midfielder. He spent a lot of his time playing for a very hard-nosed Juventus team where, you know, the winning mentality was everything, self-sacrifice for the team and so on. And I think some of that good stuff has transitioned into this French side. They're very hard-working. They all work for each other. But I think Deschamps also understands this newer generation of players. He understands that players have their own personalities that they want to express, maybe through social media, that kind of thing. And he allows this French squad to build its own harmony and its own dynamic. I think there's also worth a shout here for Hugo Lloris, who's a very, very good captain in terms of balancing this. Seb Stafford-Bloor, who's obviously one of us, wrote a great piece on The Athletic. You should go and check that out about Lloris as a captain. But I think Pogba feels happier in this setup. He feels maybe less pressured. He feels like it's a team where everybody does what they need to do, and there isn't the same level of expectation around him as there possibly is when he pulls on a Manchester United shirt. So now let's look at the tactics and see how Pogba played as well as he did last night. So France last night lined up as a kind of 4-3-3. On paper, it looked a little bit midfield diamondy, but Griezmann was very positionally fluid. And so I think it's probably fairer to call it a 4-3-3. Germany lined up as a 3-4-3, slightly like Chelsea, so quite a narrow double pivot in midfield, wing backs expected to push high, and a fluid rotating front three. But as we'll see, France not only coped really well with that, but it also left significant pockets of space for the French midfield. So Pogba is here on the right-hand side, of this midfield three, which is an interesting point because in his really, really good seasons at Juventus, he was playing on the left-hand side of a midfield three. Strongly encouraged to get up into that left half space, carry the ball forwards, be a really dynamic presence. And I think that's sometimes what's expected of him at Manchester United, and that's indeed why Solskjaer has probably played him off the left a few times, because he has this tendency to drop in. But I think what we'll see here is that his position for France allows him to affect the entire game as a genuine box-to-box midfielder. So how did France build up in a way that facilitates this? The fullbacks push pretty high. initially. The centre-backs would split quite wide. And what you had was Conte could come in here into this space, but also Pogba could drop into this pocket around here. And because Griezmann was then pulling quite wide out onto the right-hand side, and this was particularly the case in the first half, Mbappe and Benzema would stay here. So you got a really kind of lopsided build-up from France. This gave the midfield of Germany quite a trouble. Gersons is caught in two minds. Does he push up to Griezmann here, or does he wait for this inevitable underlapping run here from Pavard? So he's sort of a little bit stuck. Havertz is then left with an awful lot of people to look after, and if he starts to press here on one of the centre-backs, who maybe drops in a little bit here, all of a sudden Pogba finds himself in a load of space. And what we know from Pogba is that he's really, really good at two things in particular. Let's just say Pogba is an effortless player. When he gets on his game, his ability to do things with the ball, his ability to pass it long, pass it short, keep the game ticking over at a good tempo, carry the ball well through different players. I mean, it's wonderful to watch. And the last thing you want to do is to give Pogba the time and space to have a think about which of these things he's going to do. So if Pogba has the ball in this space, which was happening an awful lot in this game, because Germany were keeping this midfield pivot quite narrow, Pogba has the opportunity to play balls in here. At one point he did this very effectively and released Benzema into this corridor here. He can also switch the play. Oh, no, that's not an arrow. He can switch, that's not an arrow either. He can switch the play out to Hernandez there, which he was able to do. Or he can look for one of these little dropping runs here that Mbappe or Benzema were doing. Or if the German midfield think, no, we don't want him to run with the ball, they're going to close in like this. And Pogba showed numerous times last night that he had the physical beating of particularly Toni Kroos all night long. So when Pogba carried the ball, one of two things happened, generally speaking. He was either able to lay the pass off, having beaten a man, or sometimes just taking the ball almost into contact and then laying it off. Sorry, that sounds like a rugby term, but you know what I mean. Or he was able to win a foul. And there were quite a number of times where France looked for Pogba as the outball in this sort of part of the pitch, knowing that one of those two things was going to happen. The other point with it is that as this midfield comes across, and particularly if Gersons is pushing up here, and Pogba's attracting the attention of these two, Conte and Rabiot are free. And this is one of the things that France did really successfully all night. And it wasn't just Pogba who was doing it. Sometimes it was Griezmann, sometimes it was Benzema, sometimes it was Rabiot. They were able to use this mismatch in midfield to get players in space with time on the ball. And I think one of the reasons that Pogba looked as good as he did yesterday was the same reason that a lot of the French players looked really good, was because Germany's midfield mismatch and the issues that the wing-backs had in terms of pushing up and dealing with this very fluid system where your full-backs are pushing high, but sometimes your wide attackers are pushing high. Griezmann's drifting out here and that's leaving a pocket of space there, is that there was always a free man. And I think Rabiot had one of the best games that I've seen him had for a long, long time. And it reminded me a little bit actually of Calvin Phillips for England against Croatia. Because the players, the Croatian players in that instance were kind of pulled across to the left-hand side, that left Phillips in a lot of space on the right. What France were able to do consistently against Germany is have a player in space. Didn't matter who it was, and of course, if that player is Pogba, what you get is the ball carrying, the beautiful long passing, the ability to affect the dynamic of a game. If it's Rabiot, you get ball retention, you get a bit of shuttling, you get a late run into the box, which Rabiot did really effectively. Conte, again, also made a couple of these penetrating runs right up into this space here. But it's the balance of this midfield that allows it, and it's the fact that Germany were kind of caught out in this particular part of the pitch. They didn't have a natural ball-winning player in that part of the pitch, and the centre-backs were kind of wary of pushing up too much because when you're facing the pace of Mbappe or the pace of Griezmann or Benzema's intelligence and movement here, you don't want to be pushing up and helping out the midfield too much because you know you're going to leave a huge amount of space here. There was an instance where Pogba was over on this side and was able to play a beautiful pass down the line that someone, maybe it was Mbappe, scurried out towards. And it was only because Neuer was as quick as he was there that they were able to cut that off. And that was France last night at their best. Lots of movement, lots of rotation, lots of fluidity. I think the point I want to stress here is that while Pogba looked really impressive, all of the French midfield looked really impressive. And it was Pogba's ability to do certain things that catch the eye that made that stand out. But France's ability to get midfielders in space meant they all had really, really good games. Let's have a quick look now at the defensive side of Pogba's game. So Paul Pogba also had a really good game defensively. Last night, France didn't press particularly intensively, but they did press intelligently and situationally. They were quite happy, particularly in the first sort of 10 or 15 minutes, to have the lion's share of possession being with Germany, kind of feeling out how this new system works maybe. But when they pressed, it was good, and they were able to force Germany back quite a lot. Germany naturally kind of wanted to retain possession because they knew that if they pushed up too high and then lost possession, France would be lethal on the break. So this kind of played into their hands. But Pogba was everywhere. Now, obviously, if you've got Conte here, you know that this area is going to be pretty locked down. But Pogba would find himself defensively here winning the ball. He would find himself up here pressing. He would find himself defending the wide areas. So if Germany were able to get a situation here where there was maybe a runner, Pogba was doing tracking back. When Griezmann defended in the wide area, Pogba would intelligently tuck inside, and then France would create this very narrow midfield three with the wide players guarding the wide areas, and that was really nice and tight. This facilitated a couple of things. So when France were then able to win the ball back in this area, all of a sudden, if Germany have sort of pushed up, Kroos was tending to sit here, Gundogan was looking to burst forwards, the front three were here. Pogba's got space. So he's got space there to carry the ball, he's got space to pass, is what we were talking about in the attacking section. And this is one of the benefits of having this work ethic. If your wide areas are being well defended by your wide players, or even if Griezmann tucks in here and Pogba's defending this wide area, France's vertical compactness meant that when they won the ball back, they had enough French players near the ball to not have to just launch it forwards. Or if they were going to launch it forwards, there was a reason for it. It was because, for example, Mbappe was one-on-one against a defender. And I think it's really, what it means is that Pogba's positioning and Pogba's ability to get up and down the pitch meant that he was useful at both ends. I think it's also worth stressing here that when people look at Pogba at Manchester United and see him back in this position, or in the instances maybe where he was in a midfield double pivot alongside someone a bit more workmanlike, like a Fred or a McTominay, people assume that Pogba's defensively not up to it, or they wonder whether this kind of luxury player is really going to put the effort in, or they feel like it's a waste of his abilities. He shouldn't be there, he should be somewhere else affecting the game. And I think what we saw from last night is that Didier Deschamps' France has been constructed in such a way to allow Pogba to show that he's actually very capable of doing both of these things. And that's partly because of the construction of the team, that's partly because of the work ethic, it's partly because the players all understand rotationally where they're supposed to be. So if Griezmann's dropping wide, Pogba's tucking central. If Griezmann's tucking central, Pogba's moving wide. Like, there was a very, very natural rotational fluidity to this. And it also allows Pogba to be one of the French players, whether it was him, whether it was Conte, Rabiot, to then gather the ball in the situations where they win it back and they're all quite close to each other. That's when we see Pogba at his game-changing best, because he's able to carry, he's able to pass. So that's Paul Pogba and that's France. I think what's interesting about this is that, as I've said, the whole French team played really, really well. And perhaps one of the reasons that we've looked at this and gone, oh, Pogba was so much better than we expected, is because of this level of expectation and criticism around him as an individual. But I think what we can see is if a team is well balanced and well constructed, and if Pogba is able to show the range of his gifts in an environment where he feels happy and he feels relaxed and his teammates are playing not just to his strengths but to their own, we can see a really, really excellent Paul Pogba. We can see the player who cost £100 million, who is supposed to be a game changer for any team he plays on. But I think what's really, really crucial here is what we saw from France as a whole. Pogba was an exceptional cog, but in an exceptional machine. And I think it bodes really, really well for France for the rest of the tournament. So that's Tifo IRL, our new channel. Please do like, subscribe, comment, do all of those things that YouTubers encourage you to do. And we'll see you next time with another IRL video. Thank you very much.